Well, it's one of those nights that has just layer and layer of tradition placed upon it, doesn't it? And sometimes we get confused by the meanings of certain traditions and their importance. Some of them are ones from our families, things that are idiosyncratic. One of them in my family, I don't know if this is the case in yours, but at a certain time in our history, where I grew up in Ohio, it was very difficult to get citrus. And so a really nice gift, this is the Depression era for my parents and my aunts and uncles, was my grandparents would give them citrus for Christmas. That was their big gift. Now, in my family, it just so happened that my Aunt Riva, who always, who always seems to, that matched by her sister Ravina. It was a bad decade, apparently. It matched that by the fact that she was given a lemon, and which sounds like an odd gift, but it was a nice gift, except for the fact between the time that they owned it, wrapped it, and the time that they opened it, it had dried. And so when my aunt opened it, it was a withered lemon. Well, that became a tradition in our family, and to this day. So 65 years later, she's 89 years old, they continue to give a dried lemon. Every year, somebody in the family gets a dried lemon. Why? I don't know. So there's so many traditions. You have them. Who knows why you have them? What kind of traditions have you kept in Christmas? Some of them is we get family from other places. They come to California for a partly warmer Christmas. Not much warmer Christmas. What kind of traditions do you have? Christmas traditions. I know it's 11. If I don't keep you talking, you're going to fall asleep. Lasagna for dinner on Christmas Eve. That's your Italian heritage. Somebody's tradition. Lasagna. What foods do you have? What is it? Tamales. Tamales. Not in my family. Bratwurst, maybe. Tamales, maybe here. What else we got? Traditions. Who hides the pickle in the tree? Come on. Some of you grew up in pride. I can tell. No lemons, no pickles. Hide the pickle in the tree. The kid who finds it first gets to open their first gift. Don't you have traditions like that? You're all coming to my house tomorrow. Show up, not too early. What other traditions? You got traditions?
The youngest one hands out the presents.
The youngest one is Santa's elf. Hands out the gifts. There you go. Get together with family. Come to church. Christmas stockings. And some of them are quite unusual. Anybody have unusual stockings? I didn't want to go on there. You do? What is yours? Talking to stocking? Perfect. There it is. There it is. Singing Santa? Yeah. We have some of the most ridiculous decorations in the world. Tinsel? Flocking trees? Who thought of these things? People that grew up in the snow thought of these things. What other traditions do you have? You just have to have traditions, don't you? You're here tonight. Yeah, I'm telling you, I don't preach at 11 o'clock at night. Only to my wife. She usually does what you do. Watching the Lakers play, yes. Bowl game, holidays and bowl games, and basketball, what else? Pictures of the kids on the staircase every year. Right. So you have a sort of an ascending age thing. And now they're kids. Right. So that generation passes forward. You have them. This story that we tell every Christmas Eve. If you only come on Christmas, you think the Bible is 20 passages long. Luke 2. That's it. Bible. I got it memorized. And yet it comes with so much tradition piled on top of it. There's a creche scene sitting on Nativity, sitting behind me on the altar, and I know it's probably going to blow your Christmas. You do know that not all those folks showed up at the stable, right? Just sort of, that's a tradition. And the wise men came much later, and they came to a house. They followed a star, and it probably took quite a long time for these ancient astrologers to figure out where they were going to get to a particular place to find me. Did I ruin somebody's Christmas? Sorry. You can still sing about the three wise men, and you can still leave them in your nativity. It's okay. They get there, but they just don't show up at the cave, not the barn. It probably was a cave. Well, other things, there's some sort of strange visions of angels, singing angels. You've got a census that seems to be taken that has to do with taxes. It's always about taxes in the government. Did you notice that in this story, there's a very intentional way in which Luke tries to draw our attention from what would be the centers of power. In fact, we miss a little bit of it because it comes in the first chapter. There it talks about Caiaphas as the high priest of the temple. That would have been in Jerusalem. And then in chapter 2 it says, during the reign of who? Emperor Augustus. Quirinius was the governor of Syria. The places that we know today. Halls of power, people of authority. And then it said, but look over here. The little Bethlehem. Not much of this, Blythe. Things are happening in Los Angeles, but then there's Blythe. The direction of the gospel writer is away from centers of power, of political or governmental or even religious power, to say that God is doing something new somewhere else. And it's in Bethlehem. And the characters of the stories. Tonight we hear about angels, and we hear about an inn that's full. Not to really blow your mind, but the inn was probably not an inn like it wasn't a Holiday Inn, Ramallah. It was probably somebody's house, and probably a relative that already had too many relatives. They didn't have any place to put them. And so they go to the cave where they keep their animals in. Part of the house would have probably been that cave, part of that too. And the animals lived in the house part of the time. And so it's really sort of a add-on garage sort of thing, if you will, built into the hillside where they're staying. It's not an inn. Which means that the rooms were full, which means that other family members didn't move over for the pregnant lady who just traveled 85 miles on a donkey, 8 months pregnant. So even in that situation, there's family problems. Because if you were going to be nice, you would have moved over for the poor pregnant lady who's going to give birth that night. They didn't. We don't know why. And the innkeeper, that's the best he seems to be able to do. The shepherds are kind of interesting, though. In that society, shepherds did not have a very high esteem. They lived outside most of the time. They lived with their flocks. In the first century, shepherds, their testimony wasn't allowable in court because they were sort of seen as scoundrels, so whatever they said were a pack of lies. They couldn't go to the temple because of their profession kept them ritually unclean, which meant that they could never go to the temple. Which meant, in the cult of the day, is that they could never have their sins forgiven, and they could never offer sacrifices of any kind for purification. So they were perpetually outcast. Did you notice who God announces this to? The people on the hillside. Angel comes through. Now the ancient prophecies were that God was going to kind of take the gloves off, right? And make people fly right, really get tough, rip open the heavens, and legions of angels would come through to conquer, end sin, sorrow, and death forever. And yet on that night, the army of angels came through to be a choir. They sang to these shepherds about the fact that God had not forgotten them. Their society had turned its back upon them. Their temple had turned its back upon them. I don't know if you've ever had somebody turn their back on you or an organization turn their back on you. What you typically do is turn your back on them. So I would imagine there were more than a few of these shepherds who had turned their back on temple, on state, and even on God. But God had not given up on them. They're the first to receive the news that God was doing something of significance. Not in the halls of power, not in the temple, but in a place that they distinctively could understand. In a barn. Where probably these poor shepherds and their wives worked together to give birth to their own children, and their own children were cradled in a food trough like the Son of God. I think a part of what we need to hear in this story is that God doesn't leave anyone behind. We're really good about drawing lines and creating circles and making some people inside and some people outside, some people the good people, some people the bad people, some people that we can put up with and some people that we are allowed not to. And the shepherds were the ones on the outside. But God didn't forget them. And God said to them, I have good news of great joy for you. That God has come to you. Now, the news for a crowd like this, I mean, some of you I know, happy anniversary, by the way. I married them almost a year ago. Not quite to the day. We're just about 4 days off, 4 to 5 days off here. Some of you I know well. Some of you I don't know very well at all. I don't know, where you're coming from in a crowd like this. Sometimes I'm talking to the church. I know everybody's business, which is dangerous. But I don't so much tonight. But I would imagine that some of you have come here because, well, you were drug here. You had to. Come on, Daria, you really were drug here, weren't you? Made to come. Had to get it over with on the way to something better. Some of us come here because it's a tradition, it's what we do. Some of us aren't really sure why we're here. We just decided that it was a nice thing to do, and it's 11 o'clock at night. It sounded kind of interesting, and it might have candlelight, which only happened to seem to work at the fan, so we got to work tonight. But some of us are looking for something. Some of us want to reach out and have God touch a pain and ease it because nothing else seems to be working in it. Some of us are looking for a way to make our lives make sense. And we feel like somehow we've turned our lives inside out. And that maybe they're just not working anymore. We find ourselves in a wilderness of some kind. Out on a hillside. Somehow as if maybe church has turned its back. Maybe family has turned its back. Maybe even God has turned its back. I can tell you the one thing Christmas wants you to know is that God has not turned his back on you. And that for anybody who senses themselves outside of God's mercy and grace, that's exactly why Christ was born. And it's for you that God longs to come here. That's the good news of great joy that the angels talked about. We as a church is an odd thing, isn't it? And most churches are odd, and this one's odd. We have a lot of visitors here tonight, so some of our members are like, they're not odd. But we are trying to be a church that welcomes everyone. You can imagine the challenges to that. And if you find yourself in one of those categories that I talked tonight, where you just don't feel like you fit anywhere, try it out. We're working hard to be a place where everyone is welcome. And everyone matters. And everyone matters to God. And if you leave this place without the understanding that Christmas is for you, maybe you need to stand up and sing again. Shake it off. Remember that no matter where you're at in your journey, God notices you. And God is interested in you. And God's so desperate to get our attention. The point of Christmas is that incarnation is that God invades human flesh. What that means is that God is now at our mercy. And in his life, he didn't have much of it. But he's merciful. And God comes to us in human flesh so that we can never fully get all the way away from God. same is true about God. God can never get fully away from us. So as you sit down and you share those dried out lemons tomorrow, we're pressing the Scooby-Doo stocking for the 18th millionth time. We're watching Santa Claus dance that your cousin has given you, and you're driving your sisters and brothers crazy with it. Or eating ham or bratwurst or tamales or whatever it is that you're doing. Look into the eyes of the other person and remember that God has noticed them too. And yeah, I know, everybody's got an Uncle Charlie. I've got one. That God notices him too. That even though he or she may be working out a brokenness, God is still working on him or her. Don't give up on him. Please don't give up on yourself. Because you matter to God. You matter to the people around you, even if they don't behave well all the time. The point of Christmas is that God comes to us. And he never gives up on any one of us. So don't give up on yourself. As dark as our age can get, don't give up on your world. Because God's got a job for us. To embrace all of his children, to go out to the hillsides and proclaim good news of great joy. The love has come.